On June 24th, 2021, at around 1:22 in the morning, there was a building called Chaplin Tower South, which is beachfront, 12-story beachfront condominium complex right outside of Miami in a town called Surfside. And sadly, that building collapsed. And I know many of you are aware of this. You've heard of this. Just a terrible thing. And as a result, 98 people passed away. Horrible situation. And in time, they realized this had to do with the pool deck and the garage collapsing. There was some shoddy work, deferred maintenance. So as a result of that, the legislatures in Florida, of course, don't want to see a repeat of that. So as a result, there is a new law out there that will impact somebody buying a condo, selling a condo, or just living in a condominium. So it's really important for you to understand these new laws that could really impact you. And again, it's all for the best to protect, obviously, people who are living in these condominiums. Hi, I'm Jill Thomas, and each week I bring new videos about what it's like to live here in the Sunshine State in Sarasota, Florida, on the West Coast, just south of Tampa. And so if you're thinking about maybe making a move here, or even selling a property, moving away, or just selling something, then this might be a good channel for you to follow. So hit the subscribe button. And then when you're ready, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. I understand not everybody's going to be moving to Sarasota, but if maybe there's something I can do to help, call, text, email, I'll see what I can do to help give you some good advice as you process everything that you would like to do. Okay, so like I said, this is new law right now. So of course it's going to impact the real estate market in a big way and how we conduct a transaction that's in these condominiums. So I went to a local attorney, a law firm here in town. They were offering classes on this. So I took one of the classes, learned a lot, asked a bazillion questions about this and other things to do with condos, because of course I want to stay on top of everything. So in this video though, I'm not going to go super deep in the weeds. So if you're already aware of this, you might be thinking, oh, she didn't mention this, she didn't mention that. I totally understand that I'm not talking about everything, but I want to give you just a solid overview for those of you who might be in this condominium world so you can understand what's going on and what you need to be aware of, because in the end, what I share with you might change your mind on whether or not you would want to buy a condo right now or sell a condo. So here we go. Here is our new laws in regards to condo changes. So here we go. Here are my top points I want to share with you about the new condo laws. Number one, which condos are included? Okay, so if you're thinking about buying a condo, there is some good news for you, because not all condo buildings are subject to this law. It's only the buildings that are 3 stories or higher. So 3 stories, 3, 4, 5, so these high rises, mid rises. So that would exclude villas. So when you've got, it's all one level, 2, 3, 4 units are all next to each other, 2-story buildings, so 1 unit on the bottom, 1 unit on the top, and most townhomes would be excluded from this rule. So they're just talking about the taller building. Now, something interesting that the attorney pointed out is that there is some gray area with this, because associations might argue, well, our ground floor is parking. So it's just 2 levels of residential living. Doesn't count. So there might be some fussing about this as we move forward and as all this unfolds. So like I said, there is some gray area with that. Now, a colleague of mine took another class, an online class, and she printed off all the notes. So the slides that they had with it. And in one place they'd say 3-story or higher. Other places they would say only it has to be 3 levels of residential living. Like, honestly, in their notes, there was gray areas. So I think that really shows that this isn't super cut and dry, black and white, but at least it gives you an idea of what's going on. So now moving forward in the rest of the video, when I am talking about these condos, please know I'm not talking about the villas. I'm not talking about the 2-story units. I'm not talking about your average townhouse. I'm talking about those buildings that are 3 stories or higher, regardless of if it's all residential or not. Okay? All right. So with this new law, there are 2 main reports that each association has to produce. The first one, which will be point number 2, confusing first report, but second point in the video, is called Milestone Inspections. So there are inspections on the physical aspects of the property that have to be done at certain times. So this report will confirm, verify that the structural components of the building, of the structure, of everything about the property is adequate for safety, life safety purposes. So we're not talking like, the front gate's a little wonky or something like that. That's not like life safety, or the sign out front. That's not what this is about. It's life safety issues. And the word milestone, of course, indicates that there's different times where these inspections have to be performed. So first, all buildings that were built before July 1st, 1992, have a deadline of December 31st, 2024 to have this milestone inspection done to make sure everything is safe. Moving forward, once that report's complete, if the building is within 3 miles of the coast, it has to be repeated every 25 years. And if it's 3 miles from the coast or beyond, every 30 years. So again, these milestones are going to be done on a regular basis. Now, within the milestone inspections, there are 2 phases. Phase 1 is what they're calling a visual inspection. Then, if anything seems inadequate, they're just not sure about it, then it goes to phase 2, which is going to be a more detailed inspection where they'll truly determine if there's a problem and what needs to be done to rectify the problem, to make the situation whole. So again, the building, the structure, everything is going to be safe for the residents. Now, phase 1, visual. I know you're thinking, what visual? Like, I pictured a guy walking around with a clipboard, check. Yep, pool, yeah, free of leaks, check. Yep, I don't see any cracks in the stucco, check. That's what I'm envisioning. So when I was at that class, I raised my hand. I said to the attorney, I'm like, visual, what? And so he said, no, it'll be more in depth than that for sure, because you have to keep in mind as well that they're engineers, architects who are involved. These are not just like general home inspectors that are going in to do this. So they're going to be highly qualified people to do it. And of course, that's a lot of liability for them. So he suspects or anticipates that if anything is at all in question, it's going to be bumped to phase 2 so they can do further looking into it. Because I couldn't imagine saying that the building's good to go and then 5, 10, 20 years from now, there's an issue, the building, collapses, or there's some kind of major structural thing where people are hurt, not just the liability financially to that, but also how do you just sleep at night knowing that this happened? So that's what they're going to do. Phase 1 for the milestone inspections is visual, and then they move on to a more detailed inspection if there is something that is a red flag. Now, keep in mind, you can imagine that these inspections aren't going to be cheap, and the associations have to pay for those. It doesn't fall on the state. So each homeowners association, condo association, will be responsible for this. And of course, these inspections were not budgeted for. I cannot imagine how much it would cost. I'm sure, it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars, because just, a homeowner's inspection for, let's say, a really large home could be $1,500. So can you imagine if you have a high rise, how much this would cost? So this is a really big deal for condo folks. Now, number 3, let's talk about the second report. It's called the Structural Integrity Reserves Study. So this second report has to be completed also by December 31st, 2024, the Structural Integrity Reserves Study. And they also call it SIRS. I don't know if they call it SIRS for short. I'm not really sure. I haven't heard that. I'm just going to call it the Reserve Study. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, because people who live in a condominium, who own the condo unit, they share the expenses of everything that has to do to maintain the building and the common areas. You can have an old outdated kitchen, no problem. If your dishwasher breaks and you want to wash dishes by hand, that's fine, that's on you. But let's say the pool needs some attention. Let's say the elevator needs to be worked on. Just the exterior of the building needs to be patch, or maybe some restucco and painted, taking care of the parking lot. So all of that is collectively on the owners of the community. So what happens is some associations have what we call fully funded reserves, where they anticipate all of these upcoming issues, and part of your condo dues, that you pay on a regular basis goes kind of into the pot for those future repairs. And so that way there won't be a special assessment. If an association doesn't have a lot of money in reserves, they usually have something, but it's maybe not fully funded, especially if there's something larger that comes up, then they'll say, hey, listen, we want to repave the parking lot. We want to paint all the hallways and put down new carpet. Or maybe they want to do something with a fitness center. So then everybody votes on it, and then there's a special assessment. It could be a couple $1,000s. It could be $10,000. It just depends on what the situation is, because everybody together takes care of that building. So the idea is with this reserve study is they want to make sure that those reserves are there if there is an issue. They want to make sure that if there is a roof leak, they've got the money there to fix the roof leak or to replace the roof as needed. So this reserve study will go through and say, okay, let's look at how much life is left on the roof, how much life is left on taking care of the swimming pool and taking care of the heater and resurfacing it, because that's a big deal. You know, if you've got cracks in that swimming pool, that's part of that issue with the structural integrity with that Surfside condo is there were some leaks underneath and it got up underneath the building. So that was part of the problem with that. So they want to make sure that everything is being well taken care of. So they want to say, okay, this is how much life is left on each of these components. This is approximately how much it will cost to repair or replace, fix these items. And then, okay, how much money do we need to have in reserves for this? So they want to work on that report. Now, there's some associations out there that do that right now. There's not a lot that has that piece of paper that they can produce for a potential buyer, but there's a few out there. I've seen them over the years. Maybe I'll see if I can find an old one just so you can see an example of it. It's just kind of like a spreadsheet type of chart where it has all those things listed, how much life is left and how much they think it's going to cost to replace it or repair it. So that's a really good thing to do. Now you might think, well, why don't just owners just fix this stuff? Well, just like with that Surfside condo, maybe they voted against, like maybe they didn't realize that the pool was as damaged as it was, and they go, oh, we don't care about resurfacing it, or whatever it was that needed to be done to fix it. And when I was in that class, there were two other agents that live in condominiums, and they're on the board, and they said, you cannot believe how many people fuss and fight and want to argue about keeping things maintained well because they just don't want to spend the money for it. And so this way it's going to force the residents to put the money aside to make sure that everything's maintained for safety purposes. And so, you know, in the end, this is really a good thing. I really like this reserve study idea personally. Everybody has different schools of thought with that, but I think it's a good thing to have those reserves fully funded. And again, keep in mind, this is not for little piddly things, you know, just regular maintenance of generic things. Like I said, like maybe the sign out front or something like that. It's really for major components that are over $10,000 that the report requires. Now they could probably put in other things, but this is what the law states. So we want to make sure that there's enough money in reserves to take care of everything in that building. Number 4, condo rider changes. So when I write a contract for somebody who's buying a condominium, we have something called a condo rider. It's an addendum to the contract where the seller discloses exactly how much the association dues are, whether there's a first right of refusal, if there's any legislation, you know, anybody's trying to sue the condo for some reason. That comes up on rare occasions, but it's rare, but it happens. It references condo docs, all these other things. So now in this rider, it does state that once these documents are available, the seller must provide them to the buyer. So that's a good thing, right? Well, it just says they have to provide it to them prior to closing. So I wish that it was like sooner, like maybe during the inspection period or something like that. So that's the one thing that dawned on me later after I was like digging in and reading more about this after that class. So I might need to consult an attorney on this, but to see like, okay, what are the pros and cons of a buyer getting these documents, you know, at the end of the transaction right before closing. So that could be an issue in my mind. So we'll see, but that is what's supposed to happen. Now, remember though, these reports are not required to be done until December 31st, 2024. So if you're buying a condo, let's say in the spring of 2024, that association may not have these documents ready, these reports ready for you to review. So point number 5, I want to share with you some big things that you need to keep in mind. Some of it I've already kind of touched on, but I want to make sure it's crystal clear for you. So point A, the association is the entity that's going to be paying for all these reports. I already mentioned that, so keep that in mind. And if there's not enough money in reserves in the budget to cover this expense, then anticipate a special assessment to cover that cost. Okay, point B. Again, we have maybe just over 18 months for these reports to be completed. And with every single condominium complex, 3 stories or higher, in the state of Florida has to do this all at the same time. Okay, so that's crazy right there. And it's not like there's hundreds or thousands of engineers and architects out there that specialize in this stuff, and they're willing and able to take on all of these projects. Honestly, if somebody was a solid engineer, I think you could start a side business doing this. So I anticipate that it's going to be really hard for everybody to get these reports done in the next 18 months. I could be wrong. Never know. And then especially if after phase 1, you see the visual, they have to go on to phase 2 and go more in depth. That's a bigger chunk of time and energy. So to get the right people to do the job right might be a challenge. So that's the other thing too. So buyers, keep that in mind. Like, I know you're going to want to have peace of mind seeing these reports. They just might not be done until the last minute. All right, point C, actually, I just mentioned it when I talked about the condo rider. I think that there needs to be maybe slightly different language in that rider about when the seller is to provide those documents to the buyer during the transaction. So we'll see too. Again, there's a lot of gray area with all this, and so there could be some tweaking and changes as time goes on. Point D, a lot of these things I've already mentioned because I have a script over here, but I kind of just start talking too. So I mentioned some of these things already. But point D, like I said, don't anticipate these associations having these reports here, by July 1st or something like that, because I'm recording this in April of 2023. So just keep that in mind that, I know buyers, again, you want peace of mind, but if they're not there, they're not there. So you have to hang tight. Okay, a big, huge point to keep in mind, point E. Now, suppose an association does not have their reserves fully funded. Most associations have some money in reserves. It's not like it's like the bank account zero, but not like a lot of money. So if that's the case, plan on there being huge special assessments for those condo owners and or a really big hike in your association dues, because they have to quickly build that up. And they didn't say like what the time frame was on building it up. Maybe there's some talk of that somewhere, but they're going to want to get that money in there quickly to cover those expenses. And again, I think that's part of the study to figure out, okay, if everybody puts in an extra, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 today, and then we increase the dues by, $150, $200, $300 a month. It depends on what it all looks like, then we're good for a while to get that going and get it built up, because of course that reserve study is going to tell us when those components need to be replaced or fixed. So that will help with them trying to figure out how much money do they need to get out of those unit owners right away. Point F, again, I mentioned this before. The question is, people will say, well, why do we even need money in reserves? We'll just pay for it when the work needs to be done. But again, those unit owners have to vote on everything, those big expenses. So if people turn that down, then vote it down, then it won't get done. And that's where you could potentially have problems in the building. And then point G, again, the reserve study is meant for those big things, not for little piddly stuff like, oh, the, mailbox doors aren't working well or something like that. Okay, that's nothing to do with life, safety, structural. Okay, you do want to make sure that there's money for general repairs, of course, in the budget, and usually there is already, but that's not the reserve studies for. It's not for the little piddly things. All right, number 6, final point. We're almost there, but this is super good stuff for you to understand. So first, I want to give some final thoughts for buyers and sellers of these condominiums. So for buyers, you want to buy a condo, you want to buy it now, you want to buy it sooner. If your budget is already tight between the purchase price and the dues, or maybe you're just at a very comfortable level there, you may want to reconsider purchasing something a little bit less expensive or hold off on purchasing. Because if there are special assessments or those dues go up and you cannot afford it, then you are going to unfortunately be in some hot water. That's going to be very uncomfortable for you. So keep that in mind. you are going to have to consider that purchasing one of these condominiums could be a potential risk. So you have to think, am I willing to take on the risk of purchasing this property? If yes, then you're good to go. If no, then you might need to wait a while. Now, if you are an investor, there might be an opportunity for some really good deals out there. In downtown Sarasota, this is maybe 10 years ago, I should have looked it up. There's a building called Dolphin Towers, and they did find a structural crack in the building. No one was hurt, but boy, people had to pack up and leave like in a matter of hours. And they had to be really cautious about that. So everybody had to move out, and they worked on that building for years to make it sound again. Well, in the meantime, then they didn't know what special assessments they would be looking at. They were thinking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So some of those units were selling for $25,000, $50,000 because those investors were willing to take on the risk of purchasing those properties and paying any massive special assessments that were going to come up. Now, keep in mind, this building was built in the 70s, which a lot of our buildings have been built back then, 60s and 70s and in the 80s. So it was a good opportunity for investors. And then even we have some condo buildings up in Bradenton. They're in a much lower price point, 55 plus buildings, just very economical for people who are on a tight budget. But can you imagine if these little condominiums have huge special assessments? Those homeowners, I don't know how they're going to afford to live there. So then they're going to be selling their units super cheap, and probably investors will snatch them up. So, so it might be an opportunity for an investor down the road, maybe. And then sellers, you need to keep in mind, buyers might be a little bit more hesitant to purchase right now until all the dust settles, until we can figure these things out a bit more. So if you're waiting till next year and your association doesn't have the studies done. Now, if they have the studies done and everything's good, then that can give somebody peace of mind. But until then, it might be a little bit more difficult for you to sell your condominium. And then if there are a lot of special assessments or huge hikes in the association dues, then the value of your condo, of your property, might decrease a bit because people who are going to purchase are going to take on all of that liability, or not liability, but those extra expenses. Okay, seller, I know where you live is special to you. And a lot of times sellers will say to me, oh, Jill, no, my building is so well maintained, or they'll say it about their house too. Oh, everything's wonderful. Everything's great. And sometimes I see their house and they've tinkered with everything and they never hired a professional to do anything. Okay. So just because your building, you love it, it's well maintained, you have that peace of mind. Please though, don't expect a potential buyer to have the same confidence in the building and the structural integrity of it like you have. They want to see it in black and white in writing. Okay, so please, I know sellers are like that, and that's okay. That's kind of natural, but we can't expect buyers just to be okay because you say it's okay. All right. Now, sellers or condo owners, if you have been thinking about selling, it might be wise to just wait until you get those reports, or maybe do it quickly, do it right now, or wait till you get those reports and everything's clear. All right. So it could be probably sometime by the end of this year or into next year. It just depends on how quickly your association can get those things squared away. So it might be harder for you to do that. Because again, if a buyer is going to look at your place and go, well, I'm taking on this risk, not knowing what the potential dues are going to look like down the road because of those reserves, or if there is a problem with the building that needs to be addressed. So keep that in mind, that you might just want to wait a little longer. Okay, so thanks for watching this. I know this was a long video, although some of my videos are like that, but I think this is really important information for you. And really, this is our new normal right now. Once the dust settles, once we get past 2024 into 2025, I think we'll be in a new rhythm with all of this. Hopefully, most of the dust will settle and we'll have it all figured out. In the meantime, though, like I said, there's some gray areas. So there could be some little changes and tweaks along the way. That could be the case. So brace yourself with that, both buyers and sellers. All right. This isn't like 100% set in stone. So anything can happen or change in the meantime. Now, in the description below, I'm going to send, there's going to be a link to a website that's going to describe all these things. So you can read it a little bit more in detail if you want to. And of course, if you have further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Now, because this is new law, I don't have all the answers. If I don't have the answer, I can see what I can do. We'll reach out to an attorney. We'll figure it out together to see what can or can't be done so you can make the best decisions for yourself. So, like they say, the more you know. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.